torch of freedom passed from hand to yearning hand, and the vision of our fathers spread hope throughout this land, as the dream some fought and died for in my heart becomes my own. I will strive to keep her promise, America, my home. America, America, may God bless America, and freedom reign across America, my home. From the shorelines to the prairies, to the cities great and small, we have reaped the fruits of justice and liberty for all. So with deep appreciation for the blessings of freedom that we know in this great land of ours, I'm Dr. George Simon, welcoming you to another edition of Character Matters. This is the program where we talk about what I consider to be the defining issue of our time, the character crisis, and what we can do about it, and why it's so crucial to every aspect of our lives. And if you want to join the conversation, I invite you to give us a call at 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. Happy to take your call. Happy to have you join the discussion. Boy, have we got a lot to talk about tonight. Been lots in the news once again. A lot of good comments on the latest blog post in a series of articles I've been writing on my manipulativepeople.com blog, a series on trust and relationships, and the latest post on Friday at manipulative-people.com was on trust and commitment going hand in hand. Been getting some response on that article. I also have some announcements coming up toward the end of the program. But I wanted to first say a few words about the series that's on the manipulative-people.com website. You know, I really believe that America's greatness is tied up in not just the character of its people, but also in the quality of relationships that we form, because it's our relationships that really are the building blocks of our social order. And we've had a vicious circle going on, a vicious cycle going on, a negative one, for quite some time, with the relationships, our key relationships, especially our marriages, our intimate relationships, breaking down in quality, and therefore adding to the breakdown of our most treasured social traditions and cultural norms, and the breakdown of those norms and traditions, fostering and enabling and even rewarding a breakdown of our most important relationships. So it's truly a vicious cycle. One affects the other. You can't have a strong character-fostering culture unless you have good relationships, and you can't sustain healthy relationships very well in the midst of a culture that's lost its character, fostering traditions. So it's a really negative, vicious cycle, to be sure. And, you know, I can't think of anything more foundational for a relationship than trust. And as I wrote about in the latest post on manipulative-people.com, that's www.manipulative-people.com. That's my own personal blog. I also write for another blog at www.counseling.resource.com. The blog is titled Psychology, Philosophy, and Real Life. I write a weekly article for that blog too. But this topic of trust and commitment, I felt obliged to write about it because I've seen in my professional career so many relationships fall apart because there was never any real commitment from the start, at least on one party's part. You know, there's nothing that can decimate a relationship worse than when one party goes into a relationship truly committed, but the other party goes into the relationship only half-heartedly and betrays trust early on. And it's devastating to the party who really wanted the relationship to work and really poured everything into it, and for whom commitment meant such a lot that they stuck with the relationship even though the other party was exploiting that trust, trampling upon that commitment, betraying that commitment, showing themselves to be truly not dedicated to the core values that are essential in a relationship. So I decided to write about it, and of course the commentators on the blog are providing numerous examples of how they faced problems in their relationship as a result of this. I can't count the number of times as a therapist that I've encountered this problem. And I invite you, if you have a story to share, or if you have a question to ask about it, or just some opinions you want to share, to give us a call at 718-717-8296 and give us a little bit of your story. I'm sure the listeners would benefit from hearing about it. But I wanted to say on a personal note some things about the nature of trust and commitment. You know, as I see it, commitment is all about being true to some core values, being willing to honor some values, especially to another person in a relationship. And I can only speak for myself in my relationship. Now, I have to confess, there was a time in my own character development when I was not as capable of the kind of commitment that I eventually became capable of. I'll admit that freely. Character is oftentimes a matter of growth and dedication and commitment to that growth. And my character has been forged over a period of time. But I know, it's not that I believe, it's that I know with a certain degree of certainty, with a great degree of certainty, that with commitment, certain decisions were made that are simply irrevocable in my relationship. For example, there are certain boundaries with regard to the kinds of things that I will say and do within my relationship. There are certain boundaries and limits that I know, not just that I believe I would observe, that I know I will observe and reliably observe. Why? Because when the decision was made, when I firmly committed to upholding certain values and standards, it was irrevocable. There's no going back. The decision is made. You give a certain degree of yourself away with those kinds of decisions. And I can't tell you how many instances I've witnessed in my professional career where individuals in a relationship will allow themselves to go places that I know I simply will not let myself go. Period. The decision is made. The commitment is irrevocable. And that is necessary for trust. That's absolutely essential for trust. There's no way a partner trusts you unless they know with certainty that there are certain limits you won't exceed and there are certain boundaries you won't cross. That's why trust and commitment go hand in hand. And there's nothing as devastating as when one party in a relationship believes or has had some reason to believe that a certain boundary would not be crossed. And then the other party betrays that trust. It's devastating. It's devastating. And it just takes forever to repair that damage. And there has to be a real willingness on the party's part, the party who breached that trust, to repair the damage. And it has to be clearly evident that the party will do anything that it takes to repair that damage. That's how critical trust and commitment is to a relationship. You know, when I hear stories about the kinds of boundaries that folks have allowed themselves to cross in relationships, my mind is boggled sometimes. For example, I'll just give you one example. The things that certain people will allow themselves to say to one another. The manner in which they will allow themselves to speak to one another. Crossing certain lines of civility and respect. Crossing those lines and then attributing the crossing of those lines to, quote unquote, the heat of the moment, or they were really ticked off, or the other party did something that just really got under their skin, giving themselves an excuse for crossing a boundary that nobody should cross if there's going to be any kind of trust in a relationship. Now, I witness this all the time. And it really unnerves me. I see it even in some relatively healthy couples. And I say to myself, how do they let themselves cross this line? How does the person allow themselves to go there? Where is the commitment? Where is the firm decision to, under no circumstances, no excuses, cross a certain boundary, say a certain thing, do a certain thing? There have to be those limits and boundaries. And there has to be a commitment, a firm commitment, to never cross such boundaries. I don't see this anymore in relationships. And relationships take a pounding as a result of this. And it's because our relationships aren't strong. Well, it's a bigger vicious circle than that. It's because our characters aren't strong that our relationships aren't strong. And it's because our relationships aren't strong that our communities aren't strong. And it's because our communities aren't strong that our country is no longer strong or great as it has been in some times past. Not always. It's had plenty of periods, plenty of very shaky periods, but it's also had periods of true greatness. Like when we discovered our true character, our best character, in the midst of a world war, in the midst of a Great Depression. You know, sometimes I think we just need adversity. And it's during times of adversity in relationships that people's character is tested and where true character is found when it is present. Perhaps you have an example of this. Perhaps you'd like to share it. Perhaps you take issue with what I'm saying here. Whatever the case, if you want to give us a call and give us your opinion, I invite you to join the discussion at 718-717-8296. That's 717-8296. In the article that I posted on Friday, I gave a pretty horrendous example of a marriage that was a pretty lopsided one, where a person truly made the commitment to the relationship where the other party did not. And as I said in the article, there is value in commitment in and of itself. Just the capacity to make and keep a commitment is a really character-building quality. It's a real reflection of character. And I gave a quote. I'll give this quote again because I think it's a really good quote. This is attributed to Ashbash. But this is the quote. Commitment is what transforms a promise into reality. It's not just in the it's not just in the words that speak boldly of your intentions, but in the actions that speak so much louder than your words. Commitment is not about promises. It's not about promises at all. Just saying I do is not a commitment. Commitment is what transforms that promise into reality. It's those behaviors that you display day in and day out that testify to how truthful and sincere and firm you were when you said, I do, when you made that pledge. That's what commitment's all about. It's not in the words. It's not in the promise. It's in the daily living out of that pledge. To continue with the quote, it's making the time when there appears no time, coming through time after time, year after year. Commitment is the stuff that character is made of, the power to change the face of things, the daily triumph of integrity over skepticism. I love that phrase. The daily triumph. Daily. Moment by moment. Each and every day. In the situations that are presented to us. The daily triumph of integrity over skepticism. Making a believer of someone else. With the daily integrity of your actions. Making a believer of your partner. That you really mean, I do. In your actions, in your daily actions. It's the triumph of integrity over skepticism. We all have a right to be skeptical, especially these days. And we should be skeptical. Decent character is getting harder than ever to find. Much harder than ever to find. And unfortunately, I know today of too many people who, because they believed that it was impossible to find the person of ideal character, they quote unquote settled for less than they should have right from the beginning. Perhaps they didn't have enough confidence in themselves. Perhaps they thought it's the best they could do. Perhaps even if they did think enough of themselves to want better, they didn't think it was possible to secure better. Folks, character is what matters. It's what matters most of all. And when I hear the stories about why people gravitated toward their relationships, it just totally boggles my mind. Whether it be the prospect for somebody making good money and therefore providing a wonderful material lifestyle, to someone being fun and great to party with, to being hooking up with someone. There I go using a term that I actually don't really like that much, but I hear it so often. Hooking up with someone who, for whom there was all the right sexual quote unquote chemistry. Those are the things that brought people together, and it's not that some of those things don't have some value in and of themselves, but a relationship can't depend on any of those things. It has to depend mostly upon character. I apologize tonight, folks. I have vocal cord dysfunction in the extreme, so my voice is pretty hoarse and is not going to hold out too long. I apologize for that. But besides, when I get a little excited, like I am tonight about this topic, I tend to have even more difficulty with my voice. So I apologize for that, but I'm going to do the best I can. At any rate, my point is that for there to be solidity in a relationship depends upon trust. And for there to be trust, a person in a relationship needs to know that there are certain key things that the relationship partner is firmly and irrevocably committed to. First of all, the person has to be capable of such a commitment. I know many couples who got together where there was every sign that the relationship partner was incapable of commitment, period. Not just commitment to the relationship, but to any kind of commitment. Whether it be to financial responsibility, sexual fidelity, all kinds of things. I know of many cases where the couple, where a person went into the relationship worried about marital fidelity because all during the dating period, with their love interest, there were fidelity problems. But they entered the relationship anyway, or continued the relationship anyway, thinking that marriage itself would be a, quote, stabilizing influence, end quote, and therefore calm things down. And that once there were children and a stable home life, that fidelity would follow. So, going in to these kinds of situations with that mentality, you can't spell higher risk. You can't possibly create a higher risk than that for a marriage failure or a relationship failure. The capacity for commitment has to be there from the start. You can't depend upon external variables to instill something that's not already there in a person's character. The capacity has to be there, and then it has to be nurtured. It can't be superimposed. So I know all too many folks who have gone into relationships with such high risk, entertaining the illusion, the pure delusion, that's the more correct term, that basically marrying would solve the problem. And you can't get any more high risk than that. Unfortunately, I've also known some individuals who've gone into the relationship hoodwinked, where one party to the relationship was an excellent, what we call, quote unquote, impression manager. And that is, they could cast a favorable impression. They could manipulate with the best of them. And then they unfortunately have their trust shattered, the trust that they placed in this person who, from outward appearances, looked as though they were capable of so much positive stuff, so much integrity, only to have that veneer of character, that illusion of solidity of character broken, displayed for what it is, unmasked. So I told a story of Mary and Mike. And in this case, it was the female party to the relationship who entered the relationship knowing that the other person was stable and capable of commitment, while she knew in her own heart she was not. So she basically used the other party right from the beginning. Let me tell the story. Mary knew Mike would stick through thick and thin. He would never betray her or undermine her. He was not like so many of the other guys she'd dated. She knew how seriously he took his vows and how sincere his commitment was to his faith. It's not so much that she didn't care about him. She did care. And she cared about him from the beginning, just not in the way she knew she needed to care for him. She knew in her heart that she probably shouldn't have married him because he couldn't fulfill her emotional needs. But he was a solid, stable, and caring man, a good man. And good men are hard to find, after all. And she wasn't getting any younger, so how could she not say yes, even though a part of her knew that her heart was saying no the whole time? So when she made that promise on the altar, a part of her knew she didn't really mean it, not fully. And eventually, the inevitable happened. To Mike, it was the unthinkable or an unimaginable. It just turned out that the man she once yearned for years ago and had almost snagged until someone else snatched him away was suddenly available because he had recently divorced. And they just happened to connect at a gathering, and Mary simply couldn't ignore the chemistry that was between them. And eventually she knew she had to be true to her feelings, and she deserted the relationship that she had with Mike to be with this other man. She said to herself she didn't really want to hurt him, but she couldn't miss the opportunity to be with the love of her life. She just knew that because he did it for her emotionally, this is where she had to be. But as fate would have it, he would turn out to betray her. And she would realize that the love of her life, supposedly, would break her heart. Then she would question herself. What had she done? She left stability, integrity, genuine care. She left that for somebody who she thought would do more for her on an emotional level. She left a person of good character for what she thought would be a greater emotional high. And, as fate would have it, in the process, she took an emotional bruising. And hopefully, perhaps, learned some lessons in the process. These kinds of things happen all the time these days. And why they happen is because people don't adequately regard the importance of character. They not only don't appropriately regard the importance of character for their own lives and strive to develop the kind of character that would enable them to bring something to this world, but they don't sufficiently regard the value of character in other people. They don't know how to judge it appropriately. They don't apply the appropriate weight to it. They don't assign the appropriate weight to it. And this is how we've gotten ourselves into the mess we've gotten ourselves into, folks. This is why relationships don't hold together. This is why our divorce rates are up in the 60%. And this is why 75% of people who divorce again. This is why we don't appear to learn from our mistakes, because we don't value what counts. I can't say it enough. I say it all the time. I say it every week on this program. I'm going to keep saying it. I say it in every article I write. This is how I do it. This is how I carry the message. In my books, In Sheep's Clothing, Character Disturbance, The Phenomenon of Our Age, both bestsellers, one an international bestseller in 16 foreign languages and more to come. And The Judas Syndrome, my book for the Christian faith community. I keep pounding out the same message day after day, week after week, in my work with individuals and couples, in my consultations with individuals worldwide on Skype and FaceTime. I don't do formal therapy anymore, with very few exceptions. So with folks who have read my books and are familiar with the principles I advocate in my books and other writings on the internet, I engage in these consultations with individuals worldwide and with therapists. I consult with therapists who are not very well versed in the specialized art of dealing with character disturbance. And I consult with individuals who are either in relationships with impaired characters or who are individuals who have finally gotten to a point in life where they're developing some internal motivation to strengthen their own integrity of character. And so I basically uh, discuss with them and illustrate, expand upon the principles that I advocate in my books and other writings for how to develop that integrity of character. What counts? How to nurture it? What attitudes and thinking patterns to confront in order to change basically the way we think about things, to change our perspective. Really, that's what all of my work is about, folks. It's about a change of perspective. You know, this culture of ours, this hedonistically oriented, immediately gratifying, throwaway kind of culture that we have, gets us into a certain mindset. And it is that mindset with which we approach life and our relationships that can get us into real trouble. So my work is all about adopting a whole different mindset. A mindset where nothing is as important as character. Christians would say it's the call to holiness. That's what Christians would call it. It's a call to, as this quote attributed to Ashbash says, it's the call to transform promises into a daily reality, to transform boldly professed words and intentions into daily committed actions that speak ever so much louder than words. Making time when you don't have the time. Coming through time after time. Day after day. Year after year. Keeping your commitments. Changing the very face of things. Changing your daily reality by letting your integrity of character triumph over skepticism. Proving that you are who you say you are. Nothing's more important than that. Nothing is more important than that. Supposedly, Christians believe this, that we're called to holiness. And that doesn't mean just showing up at church and going through all the rituals. This doesn't mean that. It means in that momentary encounter with another human being, that there are just certain places that you absolutely will not let yourself go. Or, conversely, that there are certain places where any of us might be hesitant to go because it's either too much work or too scary. But we know we're obliged to go. And so therefore we force ourselves to go there. That's what commitment is all about. And that's what integrity of character is built on. That firm resolve. You know, we are the only creatures on the planet with this much freedom of will, we can commit ourselves to action. And so we're called to that kind of holiness. We're called to that in each and every moment that we live. And I know so many folks who consider themselves holy because they showed up, perhaps in their church on a Sunday morning, and then promptly went home or went somewhere else or went out into the world and then allowed themselves to say or do something that clearly bespoke their lack of commitment to that call to holiness. You know, we simply have to, as one of my friends who is a blunt talker, a blunt talker about infidelity in relationships, being chumped, quote unquote, as she is wont to say. She said, we really just have to make character cool again. And she's absolutely right. We have to get people thinking about it. It has to matter to us again. It has to start mattering more than anything else. If you agree, or even if you disagree, give us a call at 718-717-8296. If you have an example of how much you're aware of how you have a circumstance that testifies to how important commitment is to a relationship, to the trust that has to be a foundation of a relationship. If you have an example to share about how devastating it can be when that trust is betrayed because a commitment has been broken, then give us a call at 717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. Happy to take your call. Once again, I apologize. I'm going to be sipping on a beverage here pretty often as we near the program's end because my voice is really giving out today, and I'm sorry about that. Haven't gotten to all the roots of this vocal cord dysfunction. We think we know what most of it's all about. And sometimes the efforts that I make to minimize it work. Sometimes they just don't. So I apologize. I know my voice is going to be giving out here soon. I want to call attention to some things in the news because it's always you don't have to look very far in the newsworthy events for examples of how tremendously important character is to the solidity of our national character. And in the political season, the examples are just rife. We're just rife with examples of people acting the buffoon and people demonstrating how important character is if we're ever going to turn both our country around and the cultural crisis that has beset us around. As I've said many, many, many times before, and I'll say again, and as I have a program dedicated to each and every year around patriotic holiday times. Our whole system of maximum freedom afforded to the individual and a limited role for government, our whole system can only work. It's predicated upon people having solid internal moral compasses. The theory was quite simple. Give people who already have a solid moral compass, who already have great integrity of character, give these people maximum freedom, especially freedom from government oppression. Let them have maximum free rein to innovate, to seek and pursue their own happiness, to seek and pursue their own material, financial, and personal prosperity. Give people of good character free rein, and they will not only prosper themselves, but they will, in the process of doing so, create opportunity for others and build an atmosphere, a socio-cultural atmosphere in which the sky is the limit. And this is what makes for a potentially great country. Now, we have one candidate out there, trumpeting. Trump is trumpeting. That's exactly what he wants to do, to quote unquote, make America great again. And boy, there's legitimacy in that message, because this is something we really need to do. But in the process, he reveals aspects of his character that lead to the fact that even though a substantial number of people are giving him the edge in the polls within his party, the majority of folks see him unfavorably because they see the egomania, they see the insensitivity, they see the lack of empathy in his character. And as well, they should. Would that we had someone on the same message, with the same message, committed to the same principles, who had the integrity of character to go along with it. Wouldn't that be something? And isn't it sad? Isn't it a sad statement that we have so many people who have thrown their hat in the ring, each one claiming to be the one? Isn't it a sad, sad statement that we have so many people doing so, and yet it is still so hard to find just one of those individuals, just one, that you could truly put your whole heart behind and trust that they would keep a commitment to the values that each of us wants them to truly uphold. Wouldn't it be nice? Well, I'm here to say that it can be nice. This problem is not hopeless. But no problem is ever resolved until it's faced. That's the proverbial first step, as it were. That's the proverbial first step. No problem is ever successfully resolved until it's confronted and faced and acknowledged for what it is. We have to admit what the problem is. That's the very first step of 12-step programs. You have to be able to call the devil out by its name, and then after you've named it, acknowledge it. That's the first step. So we'll solve our character crisis. We will solve this mess that we're in. We will solve this cultural crisis that has beset us when we acknowledge and embrace what the problem is. And the problem is that we have allowed the importance of character to be relegated to a relatively unimportant place, when in fact there is nothing that matters as much. It matters to everything. There is not one single socio-economic or political issue or problem or dilemma that you can point to that you cannot directly connect character deficiency to as the culprit. Case in point, the financial crisis that almost brought us to our knees as a country and almost precipitated the greatest collapse since the Great Depression. And what was at the root of it? But a few really seriously bad apples. People of despicable character, but with incredible power. And they almost brought down a country. And not only were they never properly sanctioned, most of these folks were rescued, that's what the bailout was all about, and then rewarded with handsome bonuses. Bonuses, rewards that most of us could hardly even dream of. Well, folks, this is a recipe for cultural disaster. When you promote, enable, and even reward character dysfunction, your society is going to collapse. It's as simple as that. This is not rocket science. It really isn't. It's not rocket science. Nothing matters like character matters. That's why I call this program Character Matters. Why? Because it does. It matters more than anything. And I say it over and over again like a broken record, and I will continue to. And I'll continue to write about it. I'll continue to post articles on my blog at www.manipulative-people.com and the Psychology, Philosophy, and Real Life blog at www.counselingwith2lsresource.com. And there will be more books in addition to my 3 books, In Sheep's Clothing, Character Disturbance, The Phenomenon of Our Age, and the Judas Syndrome. There will be more books. There will be some webinars. I'll be doing workshops for professionals once again, starting this fall. And I'll be doing workshops for the general public starting next year in the fall. I've got about 3 years left in me before I just simply have to completely retire. But I'm going to give it all I've got. I love this place we call America. You hear it. You hear my sentiment in the song my wife and I composed at the turn of the new millennium. We wanted to make it personal. We wanted to reach people's hearts. We love this place. My grandparents literally kissed the ground of this place. They were so grateful to be here, in a place free from oppression and religious persecution. They could hardly believe it. All they wanted was the opportunity to prosper for themselves and for their family. And they came with the moral compass necessary to do so. And they recognized that within our system, that's all that's necessary, is that internal moral compass. That's all that's necessary, is that character and that commitment to certain core values, that unwavering commitment that can't be shaken, because a person has truly given away with the alternative. They've truly decided firmly and irrevocably that they're not going certain places and that they will go certain other places to honor their values. And so the song you hear at the close talks about that. Honoring these principles forever. That's what makes us, has made us great and will make us great again. When we value character, when we insist upon it in ourselves, and when we look for it and know how to appropriately judge it, and won't settle for anything less than it in our relationship partners, and when we instill it in our children. This is what will not only save us, but will make us truly great again. So I challenge folks like Donald Trump and all the others who say with those wonderful words that they want to make America great again. Don't just throw those wonderful sounding words at us. Show us with those actions. It's not just in the words, it's not just in the promises, but it's in the actions that speak louder than those words. Lead us with integrity of character. That's what I challenge you all to do. Lead us. Show us. Show us with that character where we can go. People will follow. People are hungry. They're hungry for that kind of leadership. And so with that, I'll close and ask you to visit my website, my books, and to join us again next week for another edition of Character Matters, and to give us a call with your own example, if you have a mind to. I look forward to seeing you again and talking with you again next week. And I hope you have a great weekend. And I invite you to visit my blog at manipulative-people.com and at counselingwith2lsresource.com, and to join us again, of course, next